And I get the distinct privilege of introducing the moderator, who is also my boss, Ken Wasch, the president of SIIA. And we're going to talk about trust and transparency and the importance to it today in the cloud.
Thanks. Thanks, Rihanna. Put this down here. Great. We're going to run this panel. It's great to have a clock to keep us honest. We're going to run this panel a little differently than we've run some other ones because we're not going to just yammer among ourselves. We're going to actually involve all of you right from the get-go. But let's introduce our panelists. All the way at the end we have Patrick Fetterman from Plex Systems, Frits Veltink, and next to me is first name, sorry, Roman. Of course, Roman Pavlyuk from the Ukraine. And what's unique about this panel is you've got 2 Europeans and an American, so we're outnumbered here on this side of the Atlantic. But it's certainly appropriate when we talk about trust in the cloud because the issues are significantly diverse in what happens in North America and what's happening in Europe. And why don't we start with you, Roman, and you can describe how, what's going on and why there's this difference in sentiment over the issues of trust.
Well, I would say why actually the question of trust appeared in SaaS and cloud world. It's a good thing that in ancient times we had all our servers being like in our servers room on premise. And you could do everything you want. You could touch your server, you could put your hand on it, and you could even sleep with your server in your server room. And now somebody else sleeps in some other server room with your data. And it's the question of trust now is actually this information is protected. Is it being maintained properly?
Well, isn't this, wait a second, let me just challenge that for a second. Isn't this the kind of question that came up in the early days of the internet? I remember 1996, 1997, when you'd purchase something online, people said, oh, do you trust that your credit card is going to be safe online? And we all laugh about that now, and I don't think my credit card is safe when I go to a restaurant. Who knows what they're doing with that credit card beyond it. But the number of times that somebody's stealing my credit card is pretty small indeed. Isn't this the kind of thing that over time the concerns about somebody else having access to your data and somebody else being responsible for its security is something that's going to diminish?
Well, it's you remember this first online shop users? They were brave guys. And so they started using something which is unknown. They actually created that trust. It's first 10,000 people, they started making online transactions. And then the crowd, we are this crowd, we followed them. Or maybe you were one of these first people who actually made this first online transaction on Amazon, buying some books. But it's years ago, I really had very little trust doing online. I had even my third credit card, which was actually a debit card. It's no, only to doing online transactions. Now I have all my cards filed on PayPal, which is actually also SaaS platform to doing online business.
That's
right?
a great idea, yeah.
And so we are here, the top industry representatives. So we were actually building this trust. We're going to be the first users who actually answer new stuff. We will show an example, and then the whole very big community. We had a very nice presentation about community right a few minutes before. They will follow us. So that's the way you initially build the trust.
Right. Frits, why don't we bring you into the discussion? You're part of an organization or a collective group of organizations in Europe called Eurocloud. What's happening with on the trust issue among the Eurocloud constituents?
Yeah, what happened there, maybe a bit background there.
Sure.
Is that one of the things what we're facing, and we had long discussions there in Europe as well, how we can face the issue of trust. And what we said is, what actually is happening, you go into a company and you say, okay, all kind of assets, that's what you said. What you're running right now is give it away to us and we'll take care of it. And just sign here, you have got the SLA and tomorrow you can start and you can pay like you use it. And maybe that the proposition is very good, and from a perspective as we as the industry are discussing here is very good. But the customer on the other side is thinking, wow, what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my organization? What's going to happen to my own staffing? How can I sell this up internally to the board? Do they understand what is really happening? And how can I know that what you provide me, the service you say you will provide me, that it will really be there? And how can I get some controls back to myself, you know, so that I can show off that we are really in control? And that's a very interesting issue. And what we had the long discussions in Europe within Eurocloud, which is an industry association as well within 26 countries already in Europe. We had a long discussion on that, and what came out there is that there's now a new certification program being started, and the certification program should see to it that there should be certain controls in place.
Who's running that certification program? And what are the penalties for not adhering to those standards?
There are no penalties yet. The certification program is now being built. Mm-hmm. And what we're looking for in Europe is to get one general certification program, and per country added with specific country-specific issues on legal and all kind of data protection. All of you will know that in Europe that differs a lot from country to country still.
Sure.
And based on that, we want to make it more transparent, you know, because it's about trust and transparency.
But somebody is going to certify that your firm is.
Yes.
It's not a self-certification.
No, it's not a self-certification.
Right. It's important.
Yeah.
Let's bring Patrick into the discussion as our representative from this side of the Atlantic. What's going on with SaaS 70?
So one of the questions that came up in prepping for this was, are there any certifications to look for, either for a company that's providing cloud-based services or as a customer examining cloud-based services? One of the most important certifications for the last several years has been SaaS 70, which is it's a set of controls, really. It's ensuring that companies have the appropriate controls in place and that they follow their processes and procedures in order to guarantee the services that they're providing. However, that's been migrating. It was kind of shoehorned into SaaS and cloud companies. It was not designed for that originally. It was designed out of the banking industry. There is a new version of that is superseding SaaS 70 now, and you're starting to see the first companies announcing compliance with this. SSAE 16 is the new standard, and this one is designed specifically for services organizations, making sure that the controls are in place to deliver the security, reliability, etc.
You get that SS, talk about acronyms, SSAE 16. And I understand it's run by AICPA.
That's correct.
The American, that's a test, Independent Certified Public Accountants, something like that.
Something like that, yes.
AICPA, right.
Because it originally came out as a banking services standard, and now the new version embraces more widely different services types organizations. But many of the larger services and consulting firms have practices based on this now, so you can get registered or be certified as compliant with it by, you know, the big consulting firms like Accenture, KPMG, et cetera, as well as many regional firms as well.
Yeah, if Rihanna's here in the audience, there's a good question for next year's Cloud Challenge. Is it what is the emerging cloud trust certification mark run by AICPA? And the correct answer for those of you who are going to be contestants next year will be SSAE 16. And I'll bet you nobody on that panel will get it.
But Ken, you're right there. It's an important issue. Yeah. And maybe I could add something to that. What's even more important as well is that if you're certified with SaaS 70 or the new version of that, you're able to say to your customer, you can come in and audit me. Yeah. You know, and there are a lot of companies, if they outsource the service or insource the service from you as an ISV, you know, they have to meet their own compliancy. They have to meet their own compliancy based on SOX and this kind of stuff. So if they can say to the internal control department, oh, say, we're rendering a service, it's a SaaS service, but you can go in on a monthly or a quarterly basis, you can do your own audit, you know, so we know we'll be compliant with the service. That's very important for acceptance of these kind of services in these kind of organizations. And that got nothing to do with technology, got nothing to do with functionality, got all to do with trust and control by the organization of making use of these kind of services.
If I may, Frits, I think if you look at the trust issue in general, there are three components that make this up. One is, can I trust you to be reliable, right? If you are not reliable, my job and my company is at risk. So that's the first hurdle. And over time, that's getting less and less of a question because cloud companies are delivering today, right? The second is...
RIM still hasn't gotten over its outage, and that's,
That's true.
It affects the reputation.
It affects the reputation of all of us, actually,
That's right.
But second, after reliability, is security. So we do hear those questions all the time, but it seems like we're at a transition point where people are starting to assume, in some cases anyways, that cloud services and SaaS solutions are more secure than internal solutions or on-premises solutions. We seem to be hearing that, especially after we walk companies through what we do for security and have a 24/7 dedicated security staff, et cetera. The third issue related to it, though, is one that's a little more open, and that's privacy. Right? So it's not just can you keep my data from my competitors, it's what are you as a cloud provider doing with my data? And the concerns about Facebook and data aggregators all play into that. And I think that's something we all need to be very, very open with our customers about, is how we're using their data. We're actually at a funny point at our company where our customers are starting to ask us for benchmarks in their performance metrics to measure themselves against. So they want us to aggregate the data of all of our other customers to show them. And yet, individually, each one is very leery about allowing us to use their data in aggregate. So there's a catch-22 going on.
The benchmarks are measuring what?
So they're primarily key performance indicators, right? So it varies a lot industry by industry, but we service manufacturers, so it's things like inventory turns, overall equipment efficiency, et cetera, those types of KPIs.
Cool. Well, let's turn it to the audience. How often? Let's take a quick. Gee, these lights are impossible. You got the mic is there, but let's just see, just as a show of hands, the cloud providers in the audience. How important is trust among your customers? Raise your hand if trust becomes one of the top 2 or 3 issues that you're dealing with. Anybody want to tell an anecdote? Anybody's got an anecdote of a nervous customer and what they asked you to do? Anybody want to raise their hand? If I can see through this. You got a question? Sure, right? So please identify yourself, because all I see is a light.
Yeah, I'm Dave Key with Cloud Strategies. I had a customer who did medical imaging radiology, and they had a hospital that insisted that they accept unlimited liability if any of their data was lost. And so the hospital wouldn't go ahead with the cloud-based radiology without the company, the ISV, taking on unlimited liability, which fortunately they didn't do. But
they wanted the company to take on unlimited liability.
Yes.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they always want.
They didn't do it, but they didn't trust the cloud.
That's what they always want.
Well, what usually happens is that people think that I wanted to my cloud provider to take care about everything. It's like about my data, about my process. It's like, which is usually not right the way of thinking. And in your case, Dave, you should have your customer should have had the disaster recovery process in place, and that's being driven by the business, not by some vendor. We as the vendors, as a technology companies, we help you to establish that perfectly, but as the data owner, you have to make sure this process is in place, and this is very important. And businesses like healthcare, government businesses who operate with very sensitive data, especially like EMR, we know that they are very compliant about security. They compliant about HIPAA. They have HIPAA compliance, which is like you could be like SaaS 70 certified, but you will not be even able to pass the HIPAA certification by definition because there are some obstacles you're not able to remove because that's the way you have your hosting businesses built. We had so many cases. And, operations infrastructure management, and especially right way of doing that, is the thing that ensures you and helps to build this trust and confidence that actually all the data will be preserved. And what I usually tell to our customers, our partners, saying like, imagine that the bomb hits the data center and next few minutes you're still online because you have the disaster recovery process in place. That's how perfect you should be. If you build your service in that way, And that's for sure. You will have a huge trust from your customers. That's
Terrific.
Yeah, that's important. And the way you can manage that is by having a good governance structure in place. So if you offer that black box solution, you go to the customer, how are we going to manage that you have a governance in place, that you say, okay, this is the way how we're going to handle with incidents. This is the way how you're going to be informed. This is the way how we handle your ticketing. This is the way we're going to report it. These are the responsible people you can anytime call if there's an incident. And what will we do if there's an incident? You know, it's very important to gain that trust and to keep that trust, because every customer knows that something will go wrong. You know, we can discuss availability up to 100%, but always something will go wrong. And what's interesting for a customer there is what you do, how you handle that in the sense when it goes wrong, and that should give him a good feeling that you're in control of the issues and that you're capable of fixing it. And simple example is, in the sense of trust, what we're discussing here is that, you know, it's very good that you call a customer or an executive and say, what we see is that your system is slow. Yeah, it's not out, but it's slow, and there's maybe something wrong. You can do two things. Don't call him and hope it will end itself, or wait that the customer calls you and says, okay, the system is slow, maybe you might have a problem. In the sense of trust, the best sense is that you call him 10 minutes before he calls you. And make him understand what you're doing to fixing the problem, or what you are doing to understand where the problem might be. If you don't do that, you know, the trust will go away very, 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 very fast.
So that's actually,
so governance, it's very important.
But that communications really is talking about a two-way trust. We're trusting the customers then to behave correctly and appropriately with the information that we're providing them, right? It's a very good point.
Yeah.
But usually they come to us, it's like they want the solution from us. So we are the first who are actually going to build the trust.
Yeah.
Because if you go to some bank, you want to like put the money to the bank, you come with some level of trust, but you have doubts. And what the bank employee is going to do is actually he's going to explain to you how secure your money are in the banks. We are on the West Coast. We are on the Wild West, right? So it's like 200 years ago, like bank robbing was the like pretty good business here. And but now we all put money in the banks. We are not afraid anymore of that, because banks built a huge infrastructure. They made a huge investment. They became professionals.
You know, that was a good argument prior to September of 2008. There were a lot of people nervous about the banking system at that point.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. Let's see if there are any other questions in the audience, because we can continue to discuss among ourselves. Anyone else want to grab the microphone and join in the discussion?
I have a question.
I got a question. Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Go. So please raise your hands who is very sensitive about their data, who is actually working, for example, with healthcare, with governments, and is...
Anybody in healthcare, anybody doing healthcare or government? I mean, obviously, if you provide data...
And not only, yeah.
What?
I mean, like not only these branches, but who are very, very, very concerned about their data.
Well, for sure. Go ahead.
Oh, by you.
Yeah, does it work? Small question around trust. You know, we are a small company providing cloud services. So you didn't touch on that, but the bigger issue I have in selling my services...
Well, you got to speak up a little louder. It's not quite loud enough.
Okay.
Yep.
So we are a startup providing cloud services. So I'm touching on another aspect of trust, which is how can I trust you as a startup to be around for a long time? So the issue we're facing is that should we sell straight away to big name company just to be able to sell our services? And what sort of answer can we imagine to reassure our customers? Thank you.
That's a good question. And the question then becomes, you know, can small cloud service providers survive in this lack of trust environment?
Yeah.
Frits?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and a lot of startups are facing that. What you can do there is discuss this issue and make it open during your sales discussion, because if the customer doesn't come up with it, you should, because they all have the question. So don't put it away. And try to make some measures around it, how you can ensure that there will be some kind of continuity or not. Because it might be, that I don't know what kind of business you are, but if you're in a volume business with low pricing issues, the continuity issue might not be that big if you're providing a high value SaaS service. So spend time on contract endings, on continuity, and sometimes customers are asking for continuity warranties. And what happens, at least in the European market, is that some companies go to their hosting partner. If you're a small SaaS provider, you're looking for a good hosting provider who can provide continuity. And all these parties are interested in providing continuity services towards you, so that the end customer at the end will be ensured that if you will not be around, at least the service will be around for a certain period in time. Because it gives him the time, or A, to look for another service provider, to provide the service, or B, take it back on-prem or whatever he wants to do. And if you can have these kind of arguments, these kind of reasons even written in paper, that will really help the customer to move with you. And,
Good. Patrick wanted to join in here?
Yeah, we've seen the emergence of something called software escrow.
Escrow.
Right? So we're seeing that offered as a service by many different companies today. It's really essentially an insurance product that we or our customers can subscribe to. It's not cheap, but the idea is that if something happened to us as a company, not our infrastructure, but we went into bankruptcy, something else, somebody would still have the financial wherewithal to continue operating the platform we provide until such time that the customers could make other arrangements. In fact, it ends up being incredibly expensive. We've got multi-billion-dollar companies among our client base who pay us as much as a couple $100,000 per month for our services. And even for those guys, it's most of the time it ends up being too expensive, at least when they do an ROI calculation. We've actually got a group of customers that are looking at a group contract, part of our community members, are looking at doing a kind of escrow themselves, putting up some money into an account that this core group of largest customers could essentially run the operation in case of a bankruptcy. It's a little funny to us because the SaaS subscription model, the revenue model, is so stable for us over time that there's a lot less risk for us than for a traditional software company going bankrupt, I think. But it's still, for a multi-billion-dollar company to trust the daily operation of their business, which is what we do, to a $50 million Midwestern company, it's a big sign of trust for them.
Great, that's good. Oh, get the mic back.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
But this is a hot topic. I've been asked to do software escrow for 25 years. I used to run software with FileNet and a bunch of other companies. And done it many times, and I think it's total bull. I have never once in my experience, and I wonder if anyone in this room has ever seen a customer who has taken the escrow and has actually run something on it. And I've done the same thing you have, and we've had it certified, and we've half the people don't even ask if you can do a build over it. I have never once seen an example of its work. So I think it's a total panacea, and I just wonder if anyone ever has seen someone go through the other side of the software escrow, rebuild the software and run successfully, because I'm not aware of it.
I think in most cases it's almost impossible, especially our system's got, I think, 9 or 10 million lines of code. It's a database with 27 terabytes of data on the back end. It's impossible. So, it's really about the operations, not the code, right?
It's ridiculous.
So it gets back to my assertion that this is really, this trust issue is it's an emotional issue, not an intellectual issue, right? We really have to get them over the emotional hump of trusting this thing that they cannot see or touch. We do win-loss surveys in almost all of our sales cycles, and we discovered something very interesting last year, which was when we took people on a tour of our headquarters and our data center, because they're co-located, we tended to win a lot more deals than if people didn't come out and see that. And it's because it got them over that emotional hump of saying, this is a tiny little company, I don't believe I can trust them with my data. When they see the infrastructure we have in place, when they meet some of the people operating the team, it goes a long way towards alleviating those worries.
I agree there, and what you see as well, what I'm interested in is how many of you are reporting on a monthly basis on all the things and services you're providing towards your customer, because that gives the same idea about, we made an arrangement, we made an engagement of using your service, but let me see how I'm doing, how you're performing against your SLA, how you're performing against your ticketing system, how you're performing within change management, how is your billing? Is your billing rather correct? Show me that it's correct. So you provide a lot of information towards the end customer on a regular basis, which will let him see that you're doing your job very well. And if you do not do your job very well, the advantage will be for him that he does not have to pay or whatever. That's completely transparency in the process towards the end customer. That's very important in trust and continuity in making use of your service.
But look what happened with huge social network providers like Facebook. Like, I know, millions. Like, it's going to be like few hundred millions people that they trusted their data to Facebook. And but the same people who are registered on Facebook, they check in different places so you can track how they move, how they go. They work as engineers, as managers, as C team members of the great corporations. They are very concerned about securing their data, corporate data.
Yeah. You know what? This discussion worries me a little bit in the sense that we live in Washington, and whenever there's a vacuum or a perceived problem, regulators or congressmen or elected representatives want to, quote, fix a problem. And we've been pretty successful so far at trying to at avoiding over-regulation of what we consider the cloud industry. There's, David Leduc, who I don't know if he's in the audience because he may be upstairs at the Content Division conference. I think he is. He wrote a whole paper on, basically don't do anything yet. But what worries me is that where there's uncertainty, there's an invitation for regulation, especially in Europe. And are we going to be headed toward we already have the fear that we're going to be in a regulatory environment over privacy protection. In other words, you've got to store the data locally. You can't take European data and store it in the United States. You got to store it in Europe and elsewhere. So basically, the world's divided into 5 spheres. Let me go over that. I mean, you got the United States, you got the EU, you've got China, which is a whole set of the largest intranet in the world, unto itself. You got Japan, and then you got the rest of the world. And if we end up with a regulatory structure that's 5 different requirements in 5 different regions of the world, we're going to diminish the a lot of the value of cloud computing, which cuts across national boundaries. Anybody want to talk about how we're going to avoid that?
It will be avoided naturally by itself. Look how...
we haven't been able to do it with taxation. We haven't been able to do it with data protection. Data protection rules are different. And the Chinese certainly aren't going to be, adhering to EU rules, Sorry.
Well, if you look back in the history, cloud actually was a thing that opened you the ability to have your data mobile, right? So you basically don't even care where your data is stored. You wish they're going to be in US. You wish, if you are a US-based company. For me, for example, as a European-based company, I would like the data to reside in European Union or Ukraine because it's convenient. But indeed, they may be in Middle Asia somehow. And so cloud was the thing that opened this. It wiped out the boundaries and made actually your data be able to locate it in the place where it's the most convenient for the providers. Because it's like in Hong Kong and Singapore, they have like cheap hosting platforms where they can put the huge storages there. Now we're going to put regulations because of different circumstances. We want to build a huge trust. We want to avoid, we want to protect our privacy because we see that it's like I was mentioning about Facebook, right? So people like put really a lot of information which is like, well, the information is not dangerous to the society, but the way it's being spread, it becomes dangerous. And there will be a regulation. So there will be, I think there will be some next wave, some next evolution that will like find a way to avoid it. It's going to happen naturally. So we had cloud, which made it happen, right? Like a few years before. Now we try to regulate it. We're going to certify it. We're going to have regulations put, as you said, in different regions, in different spheres. Now, it's hard to predict what's going to happen next, but there will be some new generation of data sharing.
Let's hope. Let's hope. Patrick wanted to jump in here.
I believe that the large multinational corporations are already superseding that. What we're seeing is companies that have businesses or divisions in China, in Europe, in South America, in North America, make us adhere to their own regulations, regardless of the governmental regulations.
It's true.
Absolutely.
What we see is those are not just multi-billion-dollar companies anymore. We see $50 and $75 million Midwestern manufacturing companies, automotive part suppliers, with plants in foreigns. They all ask the same question, which is, how do I know George Bush isn't looking at my data? And I'm serious. They ask that in all seriousness. And believe it or not, as irrational as that question was, when Obama was elected, that question virtually disappeared for us. So it really is about intentions, right? People are worried about the intentions of the companies that hold their data. They're worried about the intentions of the governments managing or owning the country where the data is stored.
Well, I mean, let's turn it on its head. I mean, would you not be, if there was a substantial Chinese hosting company, would you be nervous that the Chinese government wasn't gaining access to the data?
If they want
cast no aspersions on the Chinese,
but I would.
Anyway,
so
what?
They will anyway.
Right.
So why bother?
It's funny.
So it's. I agree with you. It's an emotional thing, but I think we got, as an industry, we got a responsibility here.
Yeah.
And the responsibility is, one is educate. Educate people who are in politics and have them understand what is going on in this industry and how they should work on legislation, that it's more in the lane with things which are happening in this world right now. Because they have a huge lack of understanding on what it really means. And the other thing is come forward with ideas on how they can solve it. Don't wait and let them solve them, but as an industry, make suggestions on a global scale, for instance, what kind of things we think as an industry is good enough, to get certified or not certified, which they can pick up and say, okay, maybe that's pretty neat to work with on data protection, all these kind of issues. And for the rest, wait, because we can't influence it more than that.
Our time is drawing down, and I hear somebody's stomach grumbling, so I want to make sure we're not late for lunch. Any last questions, last comments? Let's see if there are any last questions in the audience. And any sum-up comments? We'll start with you, Patrick.
So thanks, Ken. I think, first of all, thanks for inviting us here today.
Delighted.
We really appreciate this. I think that the message I want to leave people with is that data does not know boundaries. Data doesn't know where one country ends and where another begins. Privacy is a different issue than reliability, than data security, than national boundaries, right? I think we need to, as providers, pay attention to the best use of our services and communicate, as Frits has said so eloquently today, our intentions and get people to trust us by communicating with them before things happen, keep them informed of everything we do as we go along. And I think we will earn their trust over time.
And it's like, as Pavlyuk said, there's like three major things. It's a reliability, it's a privacy, and it's a security. So privacy is the personal responsibility of the users.
Absolutely.
Either the user is an enterprise or it's an end user. I mean, it's like it's all of us, we here. And security is our whole responsibility, both. I mean, providers and users. And reliability is actually the responsibility of the provider. So this is how it's being like distributed. So if you do well in these three areas, that's the way you build trust. And actually keeping everything transparent is actually the transparency itself. But always, as I always say, it's very interesting with the companies how they treat these different things. It's the companies that are very concerned about privacy, but they put their data on Google Docs. So, like as you said, this about Bush reading somebody's dumps. It's like you can ask, like, do Google employees read the documents because you store financial information in Google spreadsheets? Somehow they can. Well, But you are so concerned about, for example, your database dump being encrypted because you're going to be in government industry soon, so you pay huge attention to data protection. So again, privacy is the only responsibility. It's a culture.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if I'd be any more concerned about storing something in Google Docs than I would be storing something at Wells Fargo. I mean, you know, I have a bank account at Wells Fargo. I'm sure that there are employees who can have access to it, but you sure. Rely upon right. There's a corporate trust that you end up having. That's for sure. Frits, you want to have the last word here?
Yeah. You know, to gain trust, and that's what's being said, is you need to be transparent. So please have your controls in place. Have a good governance model in place. See to it that you're auditable, not only on behalf of the customer, but on behalf of yourself as well. So you get an improvement, you get change management to improve your services. And report. Inform and communicate with the customer on what you're doing, what your performance is, how you're improving your performances, and even benchmarking into the future so the customer gets more added value out of making use of SaaS and cloud services. And do that, implement it, and make it part of your own business model.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Patrick, Frits, Roman. Thank you. Thank all of you for being as patient, and let's go have some lunch. Very good.
Thanks, guys. Lunch is actually going to be served in the Cloud Showcase located in the Gold Ballroom behind us here. 1:45, we'll be back in here to hear from our keynote, Nick Carr, the author of The Shallows. So be back in here at 1:45.